Hey, John, how are you?
Very well. Delighted to be with you, Michael.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I've been telling guests all week.
By the way, let me weigh in. When
Yeah.
somebody shoots somebody in the back because of a political issue, and healthcare is a political issue, I would call it an assassination.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with you. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with you. I mean, that's why I
Just thought I'd weigh in.
no, I'm always weigh in. I just wasn't sure if the prominence of, I mean, a CEO of a healthcare company, rises to the level of, James Garfield. But I do.
You'll have to remind everybody who James Garfield is.
He was the guy, yeah, right. He was the guy that was shot by Charles Guiteau. I mean, isn't that
very good? I'm very impressed.
But yeah, Garfield was a president who was shot. I believe he was the 20th president of the United States. And he was shot by he was one of our 4 assassinated presidents. So I just wasn't sure. Sadat was assassinated. There was an assassination attempt on the Pope. Of course, Franz Ferdinand assassinated to start the First World War. Are they the same as the CEO of United Healthcare? Yeah,
I would suggest yes.
Yeah.
He was assassinated because of his position with a healthcare company. There was a political intent and a message. And by the way, anybody who celebrates somebody who shoots somebody in the back with malice and intent has no sympathy from me at all. The fact that he has become, to a degree, a hero to some is absolutely disgusting. Of course, you remember when Lee Harvey Oswald was viewed as something of a hero. It just depends on who you're talking to. But
right. And so we talked about it. Yeah, so was John Wilkes Booth by many, right? I mean, so there is again, they shot U.S. presidents. I would argue it's a little bit different, and I understand why it's and it's also why I said in the lead into this, or when we were talking about Mangione 4, that nobody's opinion is really sort of, you can take issue with why they would have that opinion, but I also understand people who have gone bankrupt because of the healthcare companies, have seen relatives pass, or people know secondhand way, because insurance doesn't cover in this country, the richest country in the world, right? I see that.
I would not defend the healthcare system, but I would remind you that a talk show host, Berg, was assassinated in Denver for his political views. And I would suggest to you, I had a death threat against me, and immediately the district attorney of San Francisco and the police department sprang to it for fear that there would be an attempt on my life. So is that an assassination? You bet. So, it's splitting hairs, but it was murder, most foul.
Oh, and that's what I call it. That's what I call it each time. He murdered this man. And, I guess in most murders, we don't see a silver lining. And I would say it's a sort of tarnished silver lining. But if there is something to be taken from this, is that many people are now talking about the ills of the healthcare system in this country.
May I respectfully point out that we talked about it in the campaign, that Donald Trump is talking about replacing Obamacare. He originally said he had a plan. Then he revised it and said, well, we have ideas. And let me tell you, when you step forward as a public figure on these issues, but whatever you want to call it, there is no excuse for it. And I think that's the key. And anybody who celebrates, I had somebody when the first assassination attempt against Donald Trump took place, people who actually emailed me to celebrate it. And I said, are you nuts? That's not the way the American system works, and that's not the kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah, you won't find disagreement here. But I will say that while we were talking about it during the campaign, the only thing that I guess I differ with you on is, while we were talking about during the campaign, there is an urgent and like, not everybody paid attention to that campaign. Not everybody, people, a lot of, as you know from covering this for as long as you have, a lot of political speak goes over people's head. I mean, we're looking at it and we're reading it. When something like this happens, this tragedy happens, it does bring attention to an issue that people were talking about now in a different way. And it sort of unifies people on one issue rather than on one candidate. And so I think that I do think there there's been a change, only, and it may be temporary, and I don't.
Well, let's see what Donald Trump comes up with.
Yeah,
if he wants to replace Obamacare, if the Republicans who tried over 60 times to repeal Obamacare and failed, if they're going to do it, and many people listening to the sound of my voice are now covered by the Affordable Care Act,
no question,
which is the proper name. So these are issues which need to be resolved, and they should be resolved in a political situation and not by a murder most foul.
It's hard to disagree with murder most foul, which murder tends to be, being the avenue to making things better. But I'm just saying, now that it's happened, maybe we go, maybe we have a different conversation about healthcare, and it's not just about the Affordable Care Act. It's about seeing the profits that are made and the coverage that's denied. And look, people are going to be talking about it. I'm talking about it more than I was before. My mother's talking about it. She's, she doesn't have to talk about it. And so I think that's important. In any case, we should move on to the things that we love.
Absolutely.
Which are the things that everybody hates, and that's politics. We're looking now. Let's start stateside, and then we'll go overseas. But John, this nomination process, and you and I have seen several of them, and it always seems like there are people that are new to witnessing them, and it's both frustrating and exciting because it means more people are interested, but they don't also know the precedent behind these things and how these vetting processes happen and how people posture and then they back down. I want to ask you about Pete Hegseth first. What do you think went right, and was anything ever going really wrong with Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense?
We know that there was an accusation of a drinking problem. We know there was accusation of sexual abuse, and that is why we have hearings. That is why when Donald Trump talked about bypassing the hearings or having a private firm investigate hearings or making a recess appointment, why we were so horrified. Every cabinet nominee and every person nominated for federal office should go through this process of being investigated. And may I say, the Trump administration seems to be waging a war against the Federal Bureau of Investigation. To be honest with you, you can be critical of things the FBI has done. Certainly I have been since the days of J. Edgar Hoover. But it's important to point out that their vetting of candidates has all been superlative. No one is complaining about the work the FBI has ever done in that area. And the fact that Donald Trump is talking about bypassing through these recess appointments, which, by the way, was used in the Bush administration to name John Bolton as ambassador to the United Nations. He could not secure the votes necessary for confirmation, and so he got a recess appointment. It is, to me, emblematic of the problem we have with the Trump process. And I hope that the senators will not roll over. There is a process. It should be followed. You either win or you lose on a vote of the full Senate. And that is what we expect when we talk about advise and consent, which is part of the process.
And I think it should be pointed out too that Donald Trump, it was said, and his transition team, whatever it was, in the days and maybe week after the election, was saying that they wanted to ask the Senate to dismiss and dispense with the nomination process and the vetting process, and actually kind of steamroll these people into their positions. And of course, that didn't happen, but that gives you an idea of how Trump sees the way our government works.
Of course, and that is what is so disturbing. By the way, just so we're clear, if this were a Democrat doing this kind of stuff, I would be just as angry. There is a process which preserves the American system, and that process needs to be observed.
Yeah, and it is being observed, and for
we don't
context,
know. We don't know whether it's being observed.
Well, we know that they're going through this meeting with the senators. What has always been done, and that
but we have not had hearings.
We haven't had hearings on the floor yet. There have not been floor votes. So yeah.
Well, of course, Donald Trump isn't president yet, and in order to do that, you have to have a nomination. But my point to you is the fact that they are talking about bypassing it, the fact that they are talking still about recess appointments, should disturb every American. And Republican senators and Democratic senators have a role to play constitutionally. And I hope that the structure of the American Constitution will be observed. Look, I was furious this week when Donald Trump talked about changing the 14th Amendment. Well, there's only one way to change the 14th Amendment. He did it on Meet the Press. If you got the clip on it, you can hear it. It was outrageous. The only way you amend the Constitution is by amending the Constitution. We have had one constitutional amendment that passed, which was then rescinded. That was the 18th Amendment, rescinded by the 20th Amendment, having to do with prohibition. If there is going to be a move to remove birthright voting or to change the 14th Amendment, then that needs to be done through a constitutional process. Donald Trump even alluded to the fact that he'd like to do it by executive order, and he can't.
You can't change the Constitution that way. 2/3 of the House, the Senate, and 3/4 of the states. And
that is correct.
And so it's not going to happen, no matter how
but
badly.
The fact that he is suggesting it,
of course,
as the man who will take the oath of office on January 20th, there are 35 words. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That is what the constitutional oath is all about. And what I worry about, what I fear, is Donald Trump's ignoring it. He did the same thing every time he hints about a third term, which, by the way, is not permissible under our law. When you take the oath of office, the way the Constitution is when you take the oath of office is the way you observe it. The only president who could have run past the 22nd Amendment was Harry Truman. But Harry Truman decided to observe it. He could have run for another term, even though the law had been passed, because when he took the oath of office, it wasn't in effect.
It wasn't in effect when he took the oath of office. Yeah. And people ask, they're always trying to find ways of skirting such a thing, right?
That's correct. And there is no way, and that is why the Constitution is so important to the preservation of our rights.
Yeah, and this is, it's also built to be tested, and I think that this American Constitution, without getting too hokey about it, because I'm not, but this American Constitution has proven to be a fluid document. But by the same token, when people try and challenge it just because they think it's a good idea, it holds up against those challenges. And
unless you're an originalist on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And let me point out that the originalists maintain that the wording of the Constitution is what should be observed. And let me also indicate to you that if you want to change the Constitution, as you, Michael, so rightly pointed out, there is a method to doing it. And you know, and I know, that the number of constitutional amendments that have been proposed over the years are massive. And we know that very few of them are actually implemented.
Right. Yeah, there's no question. So we have the case of Pete Hegseth. He seemed to be in trouble for a little bit. And then he seems to have rallied. And what people saw is Joni Ernst of Iowa saying that she had problems with him. And then the administration, the soon-to-be administration, and his supporters saying, if you stand in the way of this, we're going to primary you. And then all of a sudden, Joni Ernst thinks, you know what? Pete Hegseth would be a great Secretary of Defense.
You're exactly right. And may I say, government by blackmail is not the kind of government that I believe is good for America.
Right. It has been part of America that Donald Trump and his people are not the first people to use blackmail.
No, Franklin Roosevelt in 1938 tried to purge Democrats who disagreed with him from being able to run. That's right. That's good. It's important to have those kind of challenges. But when you have a threat made against a sitting United States senator, and that senator backs down, remember, she was a combat veteran, and her objection to Pete Hegseth had to do with the fact that he said he wouldn't put women in combat. Well, let me tell you, you're absolutely right when you say challenges are legitimate, but what motivates those challenges is what concerns me.
Yeah, and I think that what Ernst does is more reprehensible than what the Trump people say when they say, we're going to challenge you. Okay, bring it on. I'm not going to compromise my morals and my beliefs that this is the wrong person for this to be Secretary of Defense because of his position on something that's very dear to me. I mean, you don't see that. You don't see Jefferson Smith.
No, people are afraid of Donald Trump.
Yeah,
That's the reality. And when you have a president who can intimidate with fear, that worries me. I worked for Richard Nixon. Believe me, I understand the ins and outs.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with Donald Trump is so appalling to me, so against what I believe the American government and the American governing principles are. So that's why I react so strongly. And we'll see when there are hearings what comes out. By the way, do you remember John Tower, who was the senator from Texas?
Talked about him on the show the other. We talked about
him. He was the chairman of the Armed Services Committee.
Yeah.
In the end, withdrew from contention. He couldn't be confirmed because of his drinking problem, which I witnessed personally, and his abuse of women. And it wasn't brushed over. John Tower was a formidable figure.
Yeah.
And he had served with his colleagues who knew him. And yet no one that I have read so far has referred back to the Tower nomination and the implications thereof.
Well, I have. I said it on the show the other day. We talked.
Good. It goes to show you why you're sitting in for our distinguished.
I was looking for the reason. Now I finally, maybe that's the reason. Okay, so we move though. I mean, there is an orchestration to this too. Like administrations, both Democratic and Republican, put up people who may not make it through, who they feel they're either indebted to or would be great, but I don't think they're going to get through, but I'm sending a message. But what I'm also doing is I'm sending someone to take the incoming so that these other ones will get through. And I think personally that Trump is most interested in Kash Patel of all these sort of controversial.
I agree.
Getting confirmed. But now we move on. If Hegseth
wait. You mentioned Kash Patel. Let me just say a word.
Yeah, you can go. Go ahead.
The current FBI director's term has another 2 years to go. He is going to have to be fired. Kash Patel will then have to be nominated. There will have to be, I hope, Senate hearings. But Kash Patel is an instrument of Donald Trump's revenge. Right. And I think it is very concerning when you have a director of the FBI who uses or intends to use the agency for the purpose of revenge against political opponents. That is exactly why a 10-year term following the J. Edgar Hoover departure through his death, that's why those kind of strictures were put on.
Well, let me tell you how up to date we are here on the Mark Thompson Show. While we've been on the air, John, the Christopher Wray, who is the head of the FBI, has announced his intention to resign. So he will be resigning. Well,
there was no question whether he resigned or was fired. He was going.
Yeah, exactly.
And isn't that shameful? Do you remember who appointed Wray and nominated Wray? It was Donald Trump.
It was Donald Trump.
This is not The Apprentice. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for God's sake.
Yeah, and he said he's going to serve until the end of January. He had 3 years remaining on his term as head of the FBI, and it's going to be so disappointing to so many people. People are not going to understand that. Look, I don't understand. I don't understand why Christopher Wray, if he's all about law and order, is not going to try and stay in the game here.
Because there's no way to stay in the game. Donald Trump has already announced he was going to fire him. So what Christopher Wray is doing is honorably saying, I know I'm going to be fired. I'm going to resign. Let's go through this process, because there's no way he can hang on. But do you understand, again, it is a disregard for the nature of the law which reformed the FBI so it could not be used for political purposes. That's what's so shocking.
Okay. I'm with you. And it sucks. There's no other way to put it, because he knew it was what was coming down the pike, and you know it, and so many do. But I think that what irks a lot of people when I'm out in the field covering politics, what irks a lot of people is people not staying in the fight and not sticking.
There was no fight. He has no fight.
Right. He has no fight. But what I'm saying is if he were to have been fired, right, I think it would have made a lot of people say, look how petty, look how terrible, look how X, Y, and Z Donald Trump is. I'm saying it from the point of view of the people who think that he is. And so,
well, whether he is or he isn't, Wray knew, because already his potential successor, Kash Patel, is up on Capitol Hill It's a fait accompli. There's no point in being a martyr. And so what Wray has done is actually a brilliant move. He's saying, okay, I'll go. Let's see if you will confirm Kash Patel. Now, take a look at what Kash Patel has said. Don't listen to what the analysts say. There are clips of Kash Patel weaponizing, saying he will weaponize the Federal Bureau of Investigation in order to crush Donald Trump's enemies. That, to me, is enough of a disqualification. That's not what the FBI is all about. It's not a private police force for a president of the United States, pure and simple.
Agreed. And maybe it's just my personal, and you're right. And I get why he's doing it, obviously, because why bother, entering a fight that you're going to
lose? There is no fight. That's the point. If he could fight, he would.
I mean, probably. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think there's no question.
Here's what Christopher Wray said today. He said, after weeks of careful thought, I've decided the right thing for the Bureau is for me to serve until the end of the current administration in January and then step down. My goal, he said, is to keep the focus on our mission, the indispensable work you are doing on behalf of the American people. He said, in my view, this is the best way to avoid dragging the Bureau deeper into the fray while reinforcing the values and principles that are so important to how we do our work. That it should go without saying that this is not easy for me, he said. I love this place, I love our mission, and I love our people, but my focus is and always has been on us and doing what's right for the FBI.
3 cheers for him, and if only Kash Patel would have said the same things, but he isn't. He's talking about revenge, and that is something that should disturb every American. And by the way, what I'll really be interested in is the implication for the agents in the FBI and how they react to it. That'll be very interesting to watch too.
Yeah, it's always about the rank and file, and then and what the morale of the Bureau will be. And frankly, the incoming administration doesn't really seem to care about the morale of the Bureau, because of the way they look at the politicization, what they call the politicization of the Justice Department. Let's go quickly. Kim, you can tell me about time here, but I'm gonna go through a couple of more names here, and with John, and then go to Syria, and then we'll let him have some lunch. The Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For Health and Human Services. All of a sudden now, there are, not that there weren't questions about him, but there are questions about his being able to be confirmed. What's your feeling?
I interviewed Bobby Kennedy Jr. 3 times. I can tell you he is completely unfit to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. A man who not only opposes the vaccination program, but who had the chutzpah, and I'm using that word intentionally, to suggest that the COVID virus was engineered so that Ashkenazi Jews would not suffer. I mean, you listen to this kind of claptrap and you wonder what it means. And I'm not even going to get into the question of the water question, which he is now suggesting he wants to. Well, I mean, it is so beyond the scope of reasonable men and women in terms of discussion about health and human services. It is almost incomprehensible. He has no qualification. He has been discredited. He's a man who believes in conspiracy theories, a man who has made these statements over the years. Maybe if I hadn't sat in the studio with him, I might have had some suggestion that maybe I didn't know what I was talking about. But his record is clear and indefensible.
I'm not going to certainly sit and disagree with you. I interviewed him once, but it was on the 50th anniversary of his father's assassination. We talked pretty much just about his book and his dad, so we didn't really get into a lot of policy. And that was 6 years ago now. But
can you imagine eliminating chlorine from water? I mean, do you understand? The dentists of America have made a statement. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Right. Let's talk about the politics. Let's talk about, will he get confirmed?
Yes, if the Republicans in the United States Senate don't develop a backbone, he will be confirmed, as will all the other nominees.
What about, if one is going to go down, wouldn't it be a Democrat? I'm going to throw a couple of things at you. Then my far-fetched into deep theory is that his wanting to get rid of high fructose corn syrup and abolish that from all of our soft drinks and junk food is going to bother, because we've all covered Iowa caucuses and we know how they are on ethanol. It's going to bother the senators from corn producing states, to the point where they don't care about putting him in power if that's going to be on his agenda. Do you see any promise for that?
No, I don't see any. Look, you summed it up beautifully, Michael, at the very beginning. The threat of primary challenges. The Republicans in the Senate are afraid of Donald Trump. And that is a serious problem, because unless you have a backbone and courage, I think that says it all.
I agree, but just as Trump could challenge them if they're standing up for corn farmers, I mean, like, there is no fluoride lobby. There probably is, but there's not one that we can look at here that you're from a fluoride producing state. So what removing fluoride from the water is going to have a political impact. But challenging big ag and challenging corn could, with some reason.
Let's see what happens. I'm not a prophet. All I can tell you is, so far, there's no backbone. And you're right, there is no fluoride lobby, except we all know that our teeth are in better shape than our parents and grandparents, and that's because of fluoride.
Right. And the British. Oh, sorry. Sorry, my dogs enjoyed my.
Well, I don't blame your dog for barking. I'd be upset too.
My dogs love fluoride. And then before we let you go, let's go to Syria. The new leadership, I guess, of Syria is promising all good things. They're saying all the right things. When do we say we're believing them, or we've stopped believing them?
Well, first of all, we're acting preemptively. The Israelis, the United States, Turkey are all taking out the munitions, which are very dangerous. And as you understand, this is all being done in a relatively coordinated fashion. Remember, the Turks have another agenda, and that is to make sure that their political opposition does not surface in a way which would be harmful. That has to do with the Kurds, of course. So where we stand right now is we don't know. We do know this. Vladimir Putin was very badly hurt by what has happened. We know that Iran was very badly hurt by what has happened. We know that there is a fear in the Arab and Muslim world of the implications because of Iran. And so we are now waiting. One thing is clear, and I think it should be made clear: the United States, whether with a President Biden or a President Trump, has made clear they were not involved. We were not involved in the overthrow of this government. And I want to believe that to be true. I think it probably is. But there's a broader question. The Israelis are not going to roll over and allow another radical Islamic regime on their border to wreak havoc, just as the Israelis did with Hezbollah in Lebanon, decimating Hezbollah, just as they are trying to do, and I believe achieving a modicum of success with Hamas. It is a great cost, do you understand? Because many innocent people in Gaza, in Lebanon, and beyond have been killed. But the simple truth is the Israelis are not going to roll over and play dead for anybody. And that is what people have to understand. I always remember the late Menachem Begin once saying, "We are not a banana republic. We are not a vassal state." And I think the essence of Israel's position is, and you're seeing it around the world with Jews being attacked. You heard what happened in Melbourne, Australia, where a synagogue was burned to the ground. And the Jewish community in Melbourne, Australia, is horrified. I have friends in Melbourne, the stories they've told me of their insecurity. And of course, we had the same thing here in Michigan last month, where the Diary of Anne Frank was being performed in Detroit, and there were people protesting. Frankly, radical Islamists were protesting the showing or the portrayal of the Diary of Anne Frank on the stage. The hatred of Jews and the rise in anti-Semitism, if you want to call it that, is very disturbing. And I can tell you, whatever political troubles Benjamin Netanyahu has, whether he is prime minister or not, the Israelis are going to respond with great vigor. And I'm delighted to tell you, and I think it's very important, that Joe Biden and Donald Trump had exactly the same response. And one of the things that the world is looking at now is, do we have a unified foreign policy? What will happen to NATO? Last night, I sat with Betsy Rosenberg, who many people will recall on KCBS and then nationally reporting on the environment. And she reviewed with me. She's moved back to Northern California. She reviewed with me what is going on now in terms of environmental action and the withdrawal, which Donald Trump has announced again from the Paris Accords and his concept of drill, baby, drill. We are in for an environmental crisis of monumental impact, not only on us, but on our children and our grandchildren. And so I point this out again very respectfully, but elections have consequences, and this consequence is profoundly disturbing.
Yeah, there's no question. We're going to be talking about that in the second hour as well. John Rothmann, thank you for your time and input and opinion. And
Michael, can I just thank you? It was a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Mark Thompson holiday party.
Exactly, I will be there. I cannot wait, and we will have a good time. And Mark,
put it up again, because I think there's a limited number.
Mark, for once, will probably show up too. Yes, it's Saturday, December 21st, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can sign up at our PayPal with a $50 donation to lock up a spot. And when you make that donation, note meetup with that donation so we know. And the RSVP is to mtsmeetup@gmail.com. I hope that I'm going to be unwrapping a mug at our Christmas party. Mark's.
Well, let's hope you're unwrapping one and not being mugged.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that will help. Having done both, I'll take the unwrapping. So
look forward to seeing you at the holiday party. Thank you,
John. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.